Okay, Hare Krishna to all of you. Dandvat Pranam. All.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
I am at our ashram in Bardubai today.
Okay.
Here for a Kirtan session, but I did not want to miss the session here today. But I'm worried how I will handle next week. We may have a picnic here, but let us see how we progress. Next week I'll let you know. But let's start on the session today. As usual, I'll do a small kirtan and then we will start. ஆர்த்தி பண்ணலாம், நடுவில் எப்போ பண்ணனாலும் பண்ணிக்கலாம். ஜெய ராதா மாதவ குஞ்ச பிஹாரி, ஜெய ராதா மாதவ குஞ்ச பிஹாரி, கோபி ஜன்ன வல்லಭ गिरिवरदारी, गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरदारी, यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन, यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन, यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन, यशोदनन्दन व्रज जनरञ्जन, यमुना तीरा वनचारी, यमुना तीरा वनचारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी, हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे, हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम राम हरे हरे, जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा, प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा, जय गौर हरि हरि बोल, जय गौर हरि बोल. இது எடுத்துருங்க, இந்த சேர் இருக்கட்டும், அந்த புக் அப்புறம் இங்கே மேலே. Okay, Hare Krishna. So as usual, we will start off. We are doing the second session of the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So let's start first with the Mangalacharan. Om Ajnanathmirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapatantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakan Vitamsha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langayate girim yat kripatamaham vande Shri Gurum Dintaranam Paramanandamadam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Jayapataka Swami Tinamine Namaha Acharya Padaya Nitaya Prapdayane Gaurakata Damadaya Nagara Gramatarine Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we just started off last week on the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. We covered the basic topic here to say what were the first 6 chapters, which were mainly covering karma. What are the last 6 chapters, which basically covers jnana, knowledge, and the middle 6 chapters are called bhakti. But both karma and jnana, both of them relate with bhakti, and without bhakti, both karma and jnana are of no use. So from that particular aspect, there was a broad understanding, and the various sections of chapter 13, the first verse, where Arjuna is asking the 6 questions: what is Prakriti, material nature? What is Purusha? What is Kshetra? What is Kshetrajna? What is Jnanam? And what is the object of Jnana, which is called Jneyam? And then Krishna answers these questions in the whole chapter, in the whole 13th chapter. And in verses 2 to 7, largely we covered only up to 5. We have to start with 6 today. But Krishna answers question 3 and 4. He explains what is Kshetra and what is Kshetrajna in this section, which covers until verse 7. We had already started some discussions. And then he does not go by the sequence, but he goes in a different order. And today I think we will also cover verses 8 to 12. And Krishna is further answering about jnana. What is jnanam? And the process of knowledge and liberation is being covered by Krishna in verses 8 to 12. 8 to 12, he lists 20 things that are required to be done to attain knowledge. And he says, that is knowledge. And he says, besides this, nothing else is knowledge. This is knowledge. And then we will see how we progress beyond that. So, we had already covered these 6 questions. Prakriti is nature. Purusha is the enjoyer, or a person, or the enjoyer. Kshetra is the field of activities. Kshetrajna is the knower of the field. And later we will also understand there are 2 types of Kshetrajna. One is our Jivatma, and the other is our Paramatma, which is also called Kshetrajna. And then you have Jnanam, knowledge and the process of knowing Jnana. And then Jneyam, the object of knowledge. So these are all the topics that are discussed here, and Arjuna and Krishna will be answering Arjuna in various ways. So, Prakriti, material nature, Krishna says, will be answered in verses 20 to 26. So we have another couple of sections on it. Purusha, the enjoyer of matter, again will be answered in the same section. Kshetram, means the field in which one can act within the material world, which Krishna says is our body and the field. And that is answered already, Krishna says in verse 2, which we have covered. Kshetrajna, he says, is the entity which experiences the field of actions. That is, the body is being, the Atma, the Jivatma is aware of the body. So he is Kshetrajna, he knows the body. And the Paramatma knows all the bodies. The Jivatma only knows one body, the Paramatma knows all the bodies. And so both have been explained, and we have already covered that. Today we are getting into this particular section of Jnanam. Very briefly, Krishna has also said in the third shloka that to know what is the body, to know what is Jivatma, and to know what is Paramatma, all three together is called Jnana. And he will repeat the same again. And today he is going into depth. We will cover a little later about what are these 20 processes of Jnana that is called. And then finally is Jnana. So to briefly touch upon, the Kshetra is the body, Kshetrajna is the soul, Krishna is the one who knows, all the bodies. So Kshetra is the body and Kshetrajna is the person who knows. And here we also say, and the Kshetra is for whom, what is the Kshetra made for? For the conditioned soul to come and sit. The body is made suitable for a conditioned soul to sit. According to what the particular person has done before, he accepts a type of body and he accepts the type of body and he comes and sits in that body, and it is called condition. And why does he get the field? Because of his attempts to lord it over. Because he wants to enjoy away from the Lord. The Lord says, okay, be born, and therefore he gives him a type of body according to what he wants. He gives him an animal body if he has got animalistic tendencies. He gives him a human body if he is having spiritual knowledge, but he is not fulfilling his entire journey. So in that way, a body is given according to what the desire of the soul is, of the desire of the person is. And then the criteria to desire which body, according to capacity to dominate the material energy, according to enjoy sense gratification. Bhagavad Gita also says you get a type of eye, type of nose, type of mouth, according to what your desires are. So it is very important that as we have a human body now, we have to be very, very carefully using this human body. If we do not use this human body carefully, then we do have an exposure to losing this human form of life and accepting one of the 8,400,000 species. And then as a topic on Kshetrajna, the knower of the field, and based on the changing phases, Srila Prabhupada explains that because dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara. So from boyhood to youth to old age, there is transformation in our body. So we know this body, but we see that there is transformation. So he's explaining that the person who is able to see all these transformations in the body is the knower of the body. Number one, that is the first level. And then he says the understanding is, we may think I am happy, I am man, I am woman, I am from this country. Those are all called the bodily designations. And that is the first activity which is called Kshetrajna. And then we look at verses 2 to 7, where Krishna explains the field of activities as it is described in Vedanta Sutra. And then he is talking about it to say that there is also a second knower. So it is not that there is only one knower, there is a second knower of the field, and that is called Super Soul or the Paramatma. And he says, what is Jnanam? He says, to understand the body, its knower, the Jivatma, and the Paramatma is called knowledge. Jnanam means is to know the body, to know Jivatma, and to know Paramatma. So very clearly it is said here, the field of activity and the two kinds of knowers, the super soul and the individual soul. So we have covered this particular aspect, and then we talked about the difference of the soul and the super soul. Now we are coming, we have finished verse 4 also. So Krishna says, to understand, Lord Krishna further explains the field of activity. He says, how is the body constituted? What is the body made of? What changes does the body undergo? How and when and where the body is produced? And the identity of the knower of the field of the activity. Who is the knower? And the influence of the knower. All of these are questions that are going to be answered here. We also covered verse 5, where Krishna talks about the various authorities. He says that all this knowledge is not just being told by me, it comes from Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. We covered that. And Krishna says all the sages have also written and talked about it. We briefly touched upon the Brahma Pucham, which means the 5 stages of Brahman realization. The soul which is sitting inside. The first stage, the outer covering for all, is called the Annamaya stage, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Vijnanamaya, Anandamaya. These stages are covered. The Annamaya is all the food, etc., that makes the gross body. Pranamaya, realizing the absolute truth and giving symptoms of life forms, and he sees the presence of his life. And that is also the part of consciousness that is called the gross body. You are able to see it. Jnanamaya, realization of the point of thinking, feeling, willing. And one appreciates the subtle interactions of the mind, intelligence, and then that's called the subtle body. Then mana, buddhi, ahankar, we say. And then is Vijnanamaya, realization of the body and the Atma with the Supreme. And it talks about first the individual soul, and then the Anandamaya talks about the Supreme Soul. Then we covered what are the gross elements, Stula Sharira, and subtle elements, Sukshma Sharira. The Stula Sharira are called the Panchabhuta, which is Bhumi, Apa, Analo, Vayu or Kam, the 5 gross elements. And then from this is the 5 Jnanendriyas, the senses, which are the eyes, ears, nose, tongue and the skin. And then the objects of the senses, and which is the form. The eyes see a form, the ears hear sound, the nose smells, the tongue tastes, and the skin you are able to touch, sparsha. These are all covered. And what are the karmendriyas? The hands, the legs, the voice, the anus and the genitals. So the chitta, the contaminated, the sukshma sharira, the contaminated sukshma sharira is mana, buddhi, ahankar, which is, and the karana sharira, vasanas. With the vasanas, when the soul leaves the body, on the vasanas it goes from one body to another. Now today we are coming into verse number 6. Let's cover verse 6 as usual and then look at the purport here on to verse number 6. So coming on to verse number 6 as usual, you can all repeat after me and we will take turns to read the purport by Srila Prabhupada. So coming on to verse number 6. Mahabhutanyahankaro
Mahabhutanyahankaro
buddhir avyaktameva cha
buddhiravyaktam chaivacha
indriyani dashaikam cha
indriyani dasaikam cha
pancachendriya gocharaha
Pancha Chendriya Gochara
Icha dvesha sukham dukkam
Devasya Sukha Dukkham
sangatas chetana dhritihi
Sangatashetana Dhritihi
etat kshetram samashena
Etat Kshetram Samasena
savikaram udahritam.
Savikaram Udar.
These are verses 6 and 7. Mahabhutani, the great elements. Ahankaraha, false ego. Buddhi, intelligence. Avyaktam, the unmanifested. Eva, cha, also. Eva, certainly. Cha, also. Indriyani, the senses. Dasha ekam, 11. Cha, also. Pancha, 5. Cha, also. Indriya gocharaha, the objects of the senses. Icha, desire. Dvesha, hatred. Sukham, happiness. Dukkham, distress. Sangataha, the aggregate. Chetana, living symptoms. Dhritihi, conviction. Etat, all this. Kshetram, the field of activities. Samasena, in summary. Savikaram, with interactions. udahritam, exemplified. The five great elements, false ego. The five great elements are the Mahabhuta, which is earth, water, fire, air, ether. Then false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested. We will talk about what that unmanifested is. Then the 10 senses and the mind, the 5 sense objects, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate of all of that, the life symptoms and convictions, all these are considered in summary to be the field of activities and its interactions. So here we are talking about the body. What is the body and what does this particular kshetra comprise of? So let's get to the purport and then we'll get to the presentation that will give you a good view. Somebody can take on to read the full purport, please.
Hare Krishna.
But you would like to read the purport?
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Raviji.
From all the authoritative statements of the great sages, the Vedic hymns and the aphorisms of the Vedanta Sutra, the components of this world can be understood as follows. First, there are earth, water, fire, air, and ether. These are the 5 great elements, Mahabhuta. Then there are false ego, intelligence, and the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of nature. Then there are 5 senses for acquiring knowledge, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. Then 5 working senses, voice, legs, hands, anus, and genitals. Then above the senses, there is the mind, which is within and which can be called the sense within. Therefore, including the mind, there are 11 senses altogether. Then there are 5 objects of the senses, smell, taste, form, touch, and sound. Now the aggregate of the 24 elements is called the field of activity. If one makes an analytical study of these 24 subjects, then he can very well understand the field of activity. Then there are desire, hatred, happiness, and distress, which are interactions, representations of the 5 great elements in the gross body. The living symptoms, represented by consciousness and convictions, are the manifestation of the subtle body, mind, ego, and intelligence. These subtle elements are included within the field of activities. The 5 great elements are a gross representation of the false ego, which in turn represents the primal stage of false ego, technically called the materialistic conception or tamasa buddhi, intelligence, tamasa buddhi, intelligence in ignorance. This further represents the unmanifested stage of the 3 modes of material nature. The unmanifested modes of the material nature are called pradhana. Pradhana.
So, Raviji, wherever you see above the A, a line, that's where you have to elongate the A. Otherwise, it should be subtle. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. One who desired to know the 24 elements in detail, along with their interactions, should study the philosophy in more detail. In Bhagavad Gita, a summary only is given. The body is the representation of all these factors, and there are changes of the body, which are 6 in number. The body is born, it grows, it stays, it produces byproducts, then it begins to decay, and at the last stage, it vanishes. Therefore, the field is non-permanent, material thing. However, the Kshetra Jnana, the knower of the field, its proprietor is different. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. So let's get to the presentation here. So what you see here is the the various components. The 24 elements are explained here. First you see here is the Mahabhuta, we discussed it. Bhumi, Rapa, Anala, Vayu, Kam. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. These are called gross elements, great elements. You can feel and touch them, so they are called gross. And then you have the, later you will see Buddhi, Ahankara, Mana. These are called the subtle elements. But before we get to that, what are the Indriya Gocharaha? The 5 objects of the senses: form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And the Dasha Ekam, the 5 knowledge acquiring senses. Okay, and the 5 working senses. We covered this partially before also. The eyes see the form, the ears hear the sound, the nose smells, the tongue tastes, and the skin feels or the touch. And the working senses are the hands, legs, voice, anus, and genitals. So 5, 5, and 10 here. And then besides this, there is dasha ekam, there is one, which is the mind. So the mind is in one way controlling everything. So there's a very beautiful other part that says that the mind is controlled by buddhi, buddhi is controlled by the jivatma, jivatma is controlled by the paramatma in one way, right? But then the mind. And then you have buddhi, which is intelligence, ahankar, which is false ego, and there is something called pradhana. Pradhana means avyakta, means the unmanifested. What is that? 3MMN. What does it mean? 3 modes of material nature. Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. A little later you will find that there is quite a lot of description about the 3 modes of material nature. But here, in the same verse, again, Srila Prabhupada talks about the transformations of the field of activities. Vikara. He says, what is the vikara? That vikara, the transformations are non-permanent. Every, when the soul takes a body, it takes birth, it grows, it stays, it produces offspring, it dwindles by old age. Birth, growth, stays, it multiplies, then it dwindles with old age, and finally death. So this is the transformation between birth to death, and that is called the vikara. The soul is the same, the soul takes different bodies. Now we may say it is one body, but the fact is that this body is constantly changing, and therefore the body is constant in change, and the body is non-permanent. And same, when the body is useless, the soul leaves this body to accept another body. Those have all been covered in the 2nd chapter. Now here we talk of interactions of the field of activities. The interactions are, what do we do with this, with all this, with the senses, with our body, with the organs? What do? Oh, I desire this, I don't like this. Love and hate. And you are looking for happiness and distress. Sukham, dukkham is all. So these are all the interactions, all are still within the field of activities. So Krishna says a living symptom is represented by consciousness and conviction, and that becomes a manifestation of the subtle body, the mind, intelligence, and false ego. So even the mind, intelligence, and false ego are covered within these 24 elements. Okay? So it looks technical, but I think this chart gives a good view. Again, coming on, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about it. In verse 6, he explains what are the fields of the activity. In verse number 7, he talks about the transformations and the interactions of the field of activity. With this field of activity, with this body, with mind, intelligence, with all the organs, what do we do? Okay? How do we transform, and what do we do with the interactions of the field of activity? And the central theme of purport has been that the field of body is non-permanent, and the Kshetrajna or the knower is different from the field. I am not this body. And then the components of the field of activities we have covered, the 5 great elements, which are the gross elements, the 5 sense objects, the 11 senses, which includes the mind, and then you have the intelligence, false ego, unmanifest stage, which is called pradhana, which is the mana, buddhi, and ahankar, and which is the the pradhana stage is the sattva, rajas, and tamas. I think the interactions are happening. The pradhana is also talked about here, and then the basis of knowledge is as per authorities. Krishna is also quoting authorities in the 5th chapter, and he talks of vikara, the 6 stages. Now let's move on to understand the next section, which is section 8 to 12, and it gives 20 items that we need to understand as knowledge. The process by which the knower of the field, Kshetrajna, the soul, which is Jivatma, transcends the limitations of his field. That is, you have limitations with this body, which is the Kshetra. To transcend the limitations is to know this body. And the person who knows the body and properly uses it transcends the limitations. And this process of transcending includes humility, pridelessness, and accepting a spiritual master, practicing bhakti. All of these are listed here. Let's get to that and then we'll come on. So, Srila Prabhupada says this is the process of knowledge. Cultivation of these, which are mentioned in 8 to 12, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, these 5 shlokas, is the real method of acquiring knowledge. How do we acquire knowledge? I have this body, and this body is the same as some other animal has a body. How do I use this body properly to show that it's first a human body, and with this I can think of Krishna and attain knowledge? That is because we have a human body, and if you have a human body, you should know these 20 things by which you can transcend from a normal bodily platform on to understanding who Krishna is. Anything beyond these 20, Krishna himself says, is beyond these items of knowledge is called ignorance. So if you know these 20, you have all the knowledge in this world, is what it says here. So let's get to what these 20 are. So we will come to the to this stage of the purports in a while. So now we are coming on to verse number 8. Amanitvam adambitvam
Amanitvam adambitvam
ahimsa shantirarjavam
Shantirarjavam
acharyopasanam shaucham
Ashanam Shaucham
Tairyam Atmavinigraha
Yam Advigraha
Indriyarteshu Vairagyam
Yastu
Anahankara Evacha
Anahankara Evacha
Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi
Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadi
Dukkha Doshanudarshanam
Doshanudarshanam
Ashaktir Anabhiswangaha
Ashaktir Anabhishvanga
Putra Dara Grihadishu
Putradara
Nityam cha Samachittatvam
Nityam Machitvat
Ishtopapattishu
Anistopapastishu
Mayi cha Ananya Yogena
Mayi Ananya Yogena
Bhaktir Avyabhicharini
Bhakti
Vivikta Desha Sevitvam
Vivikta Desha Sevitvam
Aratir Janasamsadi
Aratir Samsadi
Adhyatma Jnana Nityatvam
Adhyatma Jnana Nityatvam
Tattva Jnanartha Darshanam
Tattva Darshanam
Etad Jnanamiti Proktam
Etat Jnanam iti proktam
Ajnanam Yadato Anyatha
Nam yatato anta.
The last 2 lines, Etad Jnanam iti Proktam. The above is called Jnana. Ajnanam yat ato anyata. Anything besides these above is called Ajnanam. So he is not explaining what is Ajnanam. He is only explaining what Jnanam is. Let's come to it straight away. I'll jump the synonyms here today. We'll get into it. First he says, okay, let me look at humility. So let me just come to that. First he says, amanitvam is humility. pridelessness, adhambitvam, ahimsa, non-violence. Then shantihi, tolerance, arjavam, simplicity, acharya upasanam, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, shaucham, cleanliness, sthiryam, steadfastness, atma vinigraha, self-control, indriya arteshu, in the matter of the senses. Self-control in the matter of the senses is called atma vinigraha indriya arteshu. Then vairagyam, renunciation. Then ahankaraha, being without false ego. Anahankaraha, being without false ego. Eva, certainly, cha, also, janma, of birth, mrityu, death, jara, old age, vyadi, and disease, dukkha, of the distress, dosha, fault, anudarshanam, observing. So this is very important. Janma, mrityu, jara, vyadi, dukkha, dosha, anudarshanam. You should understand what is birth, death, old age, disease, distress, and faults. Anudarshanam, observing these. Then asaktihi, being without attachment. So that's very important. Then anabhiswangaha, being without association. That means it is without unnecessary association. Then we are talking about putra, for son. That is no attachment for putra dara grihadishu. We should not have attachment to children, to dara, wife, or let me say spouse, because while this is addressing one gender, it applies equally to both the genders. Then grihadishu, home, etc. Unnecessary attachment to all of them, unless and until they are serving Krishna, then you can together serve them, serve Krishna. But otherwise, we should slowly get out of the attachment of children, spouse, home, etc. is also being discussed here by Krishna as knowledge. Then he says, Nityam, constant, samachittatvam, equilibrium, very equipoised. Ishta, equipoised to what? Ishta, anishta, to what I like, what I desire, and what I don't desire. Love and hate, being equal to both. Then he says, Upatpattishu, having obtained, mai, unto me, cha, ananya yogena, by unalloyed devotional service. That's also very important. By bhakti, unalloyed, ananya yogena, bhakti yogena. Okay? Then, bhaktihi, he says, ananya yogena bhaktihi. So, keep in mind, this is the first chapter in the last section of Jnana, but here also he is talking about the importance of Ananya Bhakti Yoga. Then, Avyabhicharini, without any break. Bhakti should be without any break. Then, that is constant. You should be determined. You are constantly doing things in a disciplined way. Then, Vivikta, to solitary, Desha, places. He likes to be not in too crowded places. He likes to be in secluded places. Okay? But that does not mean secluded away from devotees. Staying with devotees is called secluded away from the materialistic people. Then, he says, Aratihi, and without attachment. To who? Jana Samshadi, to people in general. He is not attracted to the general population. Everybody is doing it. Can I also do it? Or wherever there's crowd, everybody goes. We think we also do that. So he is not attracted to that. Then Adhyatma, pertaining to the self, Jnana, in knowledge, Nityatvam, constancy, Tattva Jnana, of knowledge of the truth, Artha, for the object, Darshanam, philosophy, Etat, all this, Jnanam, knowledge, Iti, thus, Proktam, declared, Ajnanam, ignorance, Yat, that which, Ataha, from this, Anyata, other, humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, approaching a bona fide spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of objects of sense gratification, absence of false ego, the perception of the evil of birth, death, old age, and disease, detachment, freedom from entanglement with children, wife, home, and the rest. Even-mindedness amid pleasant and unpleasant events. Samachittatva. Constant and unalloyed devotion to me. Aspiring to live in a solitary place. Detachment from the general mass of people. Accepting the importance of self-realization. And philosophical search for absolute truth. All these I declare to be knowledge, and besides this, whatever there may be, is ignorance. The purport for this, definitely long. I want different ones of you to read the purport, and then we would maybe pause and talk about some of these things. So, can I have each one read one paragraph, please? Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes, Umesh.
The process of knowledge is sometimes misunderstood by less intelligent men as being the interaction of the field of activity. But actually, this is the real process of knowledge. If one accepts the process, then the possibility of approaching the absolute truth exists. This is not the interaction of the 24 elements as described before. This is actually the means to get out of the entanglement of those elements. The embodied soul is entrapped by the body, which is a casing made of 24 elements. And the process of knowledge, as described here, is the means to get out of it. Of all the descriptions of the process of knowledge, the most important point is described in the first line of the 11th verse. Mai chananya yogena bhaktir avyabhakti charini. The process of knowledge terminates in unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. So if one does not approach or is not able to approach the transcendental service of the Lord, then the other 19 items are of no particular value. But if one takes no devotional service in full Krishna consciousness, the other 19 items automatically develop within him. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 5.18.12, Yashyasati Bhaktir Bhagyavati Akinchana Sarver Gunesh Tatra Sama Sate Suraha. All the good qualities of knowledge developed in one who has attained the stage of devotional service. The principle of accepting a spiritual master, as mentioned in the 8th verse, is essential. Even for one who takes to devotional service, it is most important. Transcendental life begins when one accepts a bona fide spiritual master. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, clearly states here that this process of knowledge is the actual path. Anything speculated beyond this is nonsense. Hare Krishna.
Very good. So there is one important point Srila Prabhupada makes here, and that is Mai Chananya Yogena Bhaktir Avyabhicharini. So first we talked about the 24 elements he is talking about the Kshetra, about the body, associated with the body, the interactions of the body. But to get out beyond this casing of the 24 elements, the casing means the box of the 24 elements, is knowledge. And you need these 20 elements of knowledge. And here he says that the bhakti component is the most important. All of that knowledge terminates, means the ultimate end of all that knowledge is unalloyed devotional service to the Lord. Bhakti. If you get that bhakti to the Lord, then you get all the other qualities, the other 20, the other 19 comes automatically, as quoted in Bhagavatam. Any person who becomes a bhakta automatically inherits all the wonderful qualities of all the gods and demigods. So if we get to the stage of bhakti with the Lord, then you automatically get all the qualities, all the aspects of knowledge. But you get all the other 19 aspects, but you don't get to bhakti, then it is totally useless. He's made that very clear. Plus he says, obtaining or getting a spiritual master is very, very, very important. That he says is required for everybody, even a devotee or a non-devotee. Everybody needs a spiritual master, and This 20 comprise what knowledge is. And let us now come on to understand what these items of knowledge are. Can somebody else read the next 2 paragraphs?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can I read?
Yes, please.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. As for the knowledge outlined here, the items may be analyzed as follows. Humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. The material conception of life makes us very eager to receive honor from others. But from the point of view of a man in perfect knowledge, who knows that he is not this body, anything honor or dishonor pertaining to this body is useless. One should not be hankering after this material deception. People are very anxious to be famous for their religion, and consequently, sometimes it is found that without understanding the principles of religion, one enters into some group which is not actually following religious principles and then want to advertise himself as a religious mentor. As for actual advancement in spiritual science, one should have a test to see how far he is progressing. He can be judged by these items.
So, just pause, Mataji. So, humility, very clear. So, humility is the first step. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu also says, Trinadapi sunichena taroriva sahishnuna. He comes about Sahishnu also here in the quality. Trinadapi, we should consider ourselves lower than a blade of grass. So, humility is the first step. So, amanitvam. He says, amanina manadena kirtaniya sadhari. Even if somebody does not respect you, you respect them. Do not hanker for honor to be received from others. So, this is very, very important. Mataji, go ahead on to the next. So, the first paragraph covers both humility and adambitvam, pridelessness. That is, first is expectation of respect. First, don't expect that others will respect you. That is the ultimate thing, because people may not respect you, they don't respect you, you get angry. So, the first step is don't expect any honor. The second is don't expect to be recognized and be famous. Oh, did he tell my name? Did he announce my name? I did this thing? Did he announce that name? No. That is called pridelessness. Be away from this particular pride also. So, amanitvam, adambitvam is the first. Then, get to the next Mataji, read this also, please.
Yes, Prabhu. Non-violence is generally taken to mean not killing or destroying the body, but actually non-violence means not to put others into distress. People in general are trapped by ignorance in the material conception of life, and they perpetually suffer material pains. So unless one elevates people to spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. One should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people so that they may become enlightened and leave this material entanglement. This is non-violence. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
I wanted to cover here non-violence, ahimsa. Ahimsa does not mean that I will not go and kill somebody. I will not go and trouble somebody. Okay? Ahimsa means we should not put anybody else, not just a question of killing, not putting anybody in distress. But then, Srila Prabhupada brings this very beautiful concept from what the Acharyas say. People in general are trapped by ignorance. If somebody is fallen in the road and he's already in pain and you are not doing something to relieve him of the pain, that is also himsa. If somebody is already in pain and you are not relieving him from that pain, that is also called himsa. So here how Srila Prabhupada linking it to, people in general are trapped by ignorance in this material concept of life. Most of the people, 99% of the people do not know what is Bhagavad Gita, what is knowledge, who is Krishna, what should we do. Because they don't know it, they are perpetually suffering material pains. They may look happy, they may be going to cinema, a cricket match, but they are suffering. Dubai, there's a common saying in the olden days in the Middle East, everybody will say, no problem, no problem. But actually, everybody has all the problems underneath. They just externally say no problem. But the fact is, people are in material distress, whether they know it or not, they are suffering the pain of this material world. So, the most important point that Srila Prabhupada mentions here is, so unless one elevates people to the spiritual knowledge, one is practicing violence. That is, if you do not preach about Krishna, if you do not give them spiritual knowledge, then you are committing violence. So in humility, sometimes we may say, oh Prabhu, I don't know how to speak Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam. But actually, unless you take and speak Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam to others, that you know, you may be a very good friend with somebody. And that somebody is drinking, dancing, doing everything. And you are a good friend of his. You say, he's a good friend of mine. Friend from childhood. But you don't take up and tell him about Krishna, then it is violence, because you know everything, or at least you know that Bhagavad Gita gives you all the knowledge, but if you don't give him that information, then you are committing violence. So it is very important that we pass on the information. So one should try his best, Srila Prabhupada says, one should try his best to distribute real knowledge to the people so that they may become enlightened and leave this material entanglement. That is non-violence. So very, very important concept of non-violence. So let's get to tolerance. Somebody else can read the purport from here. Shantihi, tolerance. Somebody else wants to read?
Should I take it, Prabhuji?
Yes, please go.
Tolerance means that one should be practiced to bear insult and dishonor from others. If one is engaged in the advancement of spiritual knowledge, there will be so many insults and much dishonor from others. This is expected because material nature is so constituted. Even a boy like Prahlada, who only 5 years old, was engaged in the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, was endangered when his father became antagonistic to his devotion. The father tried to kill him in so many ways, but Prahlada tolerated him. So there may be many impediments to making advancement in spiritual knowledge, but we should be tolerant and continue our progress with determination.
So here tolerance talks about, people trying to insult us, dishonor us, but those of us who are engaged in advancement of spiritual knowledge, even though you are involved in the spiritual process, people will talk negative of you. They'll talk negative of you're not coming to parties, you're wearing a tilak, you're worshipping deities, going to temple, every time going only on a holiday to Kshetras. All of this will be talked. Okay, because that is where people are. So Prahlad was also involved in spiritual knowledge and his own father tortured him. But Prahlad tolerated it all. Actually, there's a very important verse that says a person who tolerates all the difficulties that he faces is being tested by Krishna, and by tolerating it, he becomes qualified to be entering the spiritual kingdom. Okay? So this is very important. So to tolerate, understand that wrong things can happen to you. If when it happens, you should know how to tolerate it. So that tolerance is very, very important aspect of knowledge. Right. Somebody else can read the next. Simplicity. Arjavam.
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Raviji.
Simplicity means that without diplomacy, one should be so straightforward that he can disclose the real truth even to an enemy. As for acceptance of the spiritual master, that is essential, because without the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, one cannot progress in the spiritual science. One should approach the spiritual master with all humility and offer him all services so that he will be pleased to bestow his blessings upon the disciple. Because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows any blessings upon his disciple, that will make that disciple immediately advanced without the disciples following the regulative principles, or the regulative principles will be easier for one who has served the spiritual master without reservation.
Please pause here. Here there are two topics that Krishna speaks. One is simplicity. Simplicity means very, very simple. That is, he's outspoken, no diplomacy, he doesn't know how to hide things from others. We need to be very, very careful in the way we deal with things. We hide things from our own relatives and friends, from our own family. But a simple man has got nothing to hide. He talks things openly. Right? So that is simplicity, is another very good quality that's being taught. Yes, in the material world, sometimes simplicity, you need to be careful about whom to tell what. But generally, you'll see some people are so sadhu that they will tell everything to everybody else. Some people, something they have to tell you, but they won't tell you. Something that is directly impacting your relationship, they won't tell you also. Hiding. So, we need to be careful about how we deal with things. Tell the truth. Satyam bruhi, priyam bruhi, na satyam apriyam. Though, Shastra say, tell the truth and tell things that are palatable. Don't tell truth that is unpalatable. But you need to be very, very simple in the way you deal with things. And a very important aspect that is being taught here is acceptance of a spiritual master. So here, Srila Prabhupada writes boldly, because a bona fide spiritual master is a representative of Krishna, if he bestows blessings upon his disciple, that will make the disciple immediately advanced without the disciples following the regulative principles. Even if the disciple is not fully following regulative principles, he accepts a guru, then the guru is absolving you of all sinful reactions. That is why we say, of course, we don't want to unnecessarily, cause that difficulty to the guru. But the fact is, if you have a genuine desire for accepting a guru, that guru, and you are making genuine steps towards progressing in Krishna consciousness, though you may have some bad qualities, that guru will give you blessings. And that guru, when he accepts you, he is absolving you from all the sins that you have committed. And even though you are not perfect, he is accepting you so that you will be able to make progress in spiritual life. Then, there's a saying called cleanliness is equal to godliness. It's next to godliness. So what is cleanliness? Can somebody else read the purport here? I will read it. Cleanliness is essential for making advancement in spiritual life. There are two kinds of cleanliness, external and internal. External cleanliness means taking a bath, but for internal cleanliness, one has to think of Krishna always and chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. This process cleans the accumulated dust of past karma from the mind. This is very, very, very important. So, for cleanliness, what do? We have a bath. We know what to touch, what not to touch. At the time of COVID, they told you, anything you touch, make sure that you wash your hands before you touch other organs of your body, before you touch your nose, before you touch your mouth. Be careful that you have washed your hands properly. So according to spiritual cleanliness, if you touch your nose and your mouth or your hair, you are not qualified to directly do any service to Krishna. So you have to do achaman. Okay, so you clean. One is having a bath. And there are many types of bath. And the main bath is having a nice full bath, head to toe. Then, even after bath, as you are post-bath also serving, there is a process of cleaning yourself. Every time you are doing something special with the deity, and that's called achaman. And that achaman, you are pouring water, Achyutayanama, Anantayanama, Govindayanama, Keshava, Narayana, Madhava, Govinda, Vishnu, Matsudana, Trivikrama, Vamana, Sridhar, Kesha, Padmanabha, Damodara. This is again a process of cleanliness, achaman. And then, this is all, the external having a bath is one type of cleanliness. Achaman by mantra, it's called mantra shuddhi. By mantra, you are doing cleansing. So even sometimes you don't have a capacity to have a bath, by mantra you can do these things. Okay? And then even Islam says, if you don't have water to cleanse, you take some sand and you rub it in your hand. It says how you clean your feet, the gaps in your feet, your nails, your nose, your eyes, your mouth, your genitals, etc. These are all the, what do they call? Wazu. Huh? Wazu. They call it the cleansing. So even in Islam, if you see, every mosque, there's a separate area for external cleansing. People will have to go there. They have to wash their feet, their hands. Very clear regulations up to where you have to wash your hands, your hair, your nose, your eyes. And then only you can get into the mosque to do prayers. For us, having a bath. And then doing achaman before you touch any important gadgets. But some of these look external. Mantra Shuddhi is better. But the best is to cleanse yourself internally, and that cleansing is possible only by mantra, specifically by Mahamantra, which is Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we have to say that we have to be clear that we have to be externally and internally clean. Externally being clean, having a bath, but mentally thinking all nonsense. That is wrong. So we need to be very, very clean from all that aspect. Then is the next, he talks about steadiness. And he's saying sthiryam. Sthiryam means steadiness to progress in spiritual activity. Somebody would like to read that paragraph?
Hare Krishna. Steadiness means that one should be very determined to make progress in spiritual life. Without such determination, one cannot make tangible progress. And self-control means that one should not accept anything which is detrimental to the path of spiritual progress. One should become accustomed to this and reject anything which is against the path of spiritual progress. This is real renunciation. The senses are so strong that they are always anxious to have sense gratification. One should not cater to these demands which are not necessary. The senses should only be gratified to keep the body fit so that one can discharge his duty in advancing in spiritual life. The most important uncontrollable sense is the tongue. Hare Krishna. Can you move a little bit, Prabhuji?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, if one can control the tongue, then there is every possibility of controlling the other senses. The function of tongue is to taste and to vibrate. Therefore, by systematic regulation, the tongue should always be engaged in tasting the remnants of footsteps offered to Krishna and chanting Hare Krishna. As far as eyes are concerned, they should not be allowed to see anything but the beautiful form of Krishna. That will control the eyes. Similarly, the ear should be engaged in hearing about Krishna, and the nose is smelling the flowers offered to Krishna. This is the process of devotional service, and it is understood here that Bhagavad Gita is simply expounding the science of devotional service. Devotional service is the main and sole objective. Unintelligent commentators on the Bhagavad Gita try to divert the mind of the reader to other subjects, but there is no other subject in Bhagavad Gita than devotional service. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. So here there are two topics covered. First is steadiness, okay, which is called sthiryam. So in our spiritual life we should be steady, means determined. If you want to take up a vow, we should do it. If we take a vow that we will wake up early in the morning, we should do it. If we take a vow that we will chant 16 rounds, we should do it. If we take a vow that we will keep Ekadasi Vrata, we should do it. If we take a vow that we will attend satsanga, you should go and attend satsanga. If you're not able to make it for genuine reasons, fine. Otherwise, make your effort to try and be there, because the satsanga is very, very important aspect. So that determination is very, very important in spiritual life. Without determination, you will say, okay, oh no, not today. Today I will sleep. I won't have a bath on time. I won't do puja today. I won't chant today. No holiday from all this. We have to be determined to do it. What day can you say, no, I'm not going to eat anything? No. You have to eat every day 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. So why holiday for spiritual life at all? Not required. So then he talks about, the self-control, Atma Vinigraha. Self-control is also very, very, very important. And what does self-control mean? Should not accept that which is detrimental to the path of spiritual process. Anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam. So this is another important. Anukula, whatever is favorable for spiritual life, accept it. Pratikula, whatever is not favorable for spiritual life, give it up. If a friend is favorable for spiritual life, every time he comes you talk about Bhagavad Gita, accept it. If a friend is not favorable for spiritual life, keep away from him. Yes, you may say hi, bye, but nothing more. Don't get too actively involved. So you need to know what to do. Then he says, one should become accustomed to this and reject anything which is against the path of spiritual progress. That's real renunciation. Then he says the senses are so strong that they are always anxious to have sense gratification. The sense wants something or the other. So we should not cater to the demands of the senses. Once you let it go, then it pulls you again and again and again to do something which may be totally wrong. So the senses should only be gratified to keep the body fit so that one can discharge his duty in advancing in spiritual life. Yes, you need to be careful about where to have that sense pleasure. Then the most important and uncontrolled sense is the tongue. In the Upadeshamrita, it is said, Jihva Vegam, okay? Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam, Jihva Vegam, Udara Upasta Vegam, Etan Vegan Yovishahe Tadiraha, Sarvam Apimam Prativim Cha Shishyaha, Vacho Vegam, the sense to the urge to speak, Manasa, the urge to do what the mind is impelling you to do, Krodha, anger, Jihva, the mouth, Udara, the belly, Upasta, the genitals. So it says that if you control your tongue, you can control your stomach. We all know that. You have a problem? The doctor says, don't eat sweet items, eat this, don't eat at this time, don't eat at that time. Because as soon as you eat, and one doctor told me, stop wheat. And as soon as I reduced wheat, I could lose so much kilos of weight. So he said, immediately, he saw my tummy and he said, stop wheat. When I stopped wheat, tummy just went down, practically without any difficulty. And so, what Upadeshamrita says is when you eat and when you overeat, it says all the organs put the pressure into your belly, and when your belly becomes big, the belly puts pressure into your genitals. The attachment to have sense enjoyment through the genitals also increases. So that's what Srila Prabhupada says here. If one can control the tongue, then there is every possibility of controlling other senses. So if you do Ekadasi Vrata, Janmashtami Vrata, other occasions where you do fasting, then if you take the Vrata of no coffee, no tea, it is a big tapasya these days. But when you do these Vrata, then you have the possibility that you can do the other tapasya. So the function of the tongue is to taste, eat, and to vibrate. And therefore he says, it's not that you don't taste. Yes, you have to taste, but taste Krishna Prasadam. Systematic regulation of the tongue should always be engaged in tasting Krishna Prasad, Uchishta, which is offered to Krishna. Yajna Shishtashina Santo, Muchyante Sarvakilbishaihi, Bunjate Te Agam Papaha, E Pachanti Atma Karanat. Yajna Shishta, if you eat remnants of foodstuff offered to Krishna, Muchyante Sarvakilbishaihi, it relieves all the sinful reactions. And in terms of vibration, you should only talk about Krishna as much as possible. So again, speak to others about Krishna, chant mantras, chant loudly, sing Krishna bhajans, right? And talk to others as much as is necessary. That is the most important. Then we talk about the eyes. The eyes are concerned, they should not be allowed to see anything but the beautiful form of Krishna. We should avoid seeing unnecessarily movies. Sometimes for company within family, yes, but then the attachment to constantly keep watching TV, sports, cinemas, serials, we should try and get rid of that. And we should use our eyes when our eyes are vibrant, when our eyes can see things and enjoy, see the beauty of Krishna, look at the beautiful forms of the Lord and enjoy the beauty of Krishna, right? So that is very, very important. Then he said the ears should be used in engage in hearing about Krishna. The nose in smelling. So we'll come to that. Savai mana Krishna padar vindeyoho. We'll come to that shloka very, very soon. Okay? So every sense should be used in Krishna consciousness. Then the sense is not hankering for something negative. You want to hear music? Come to Kirtans. You want to see something beautiful? See the Darshan Arti every day. Or see the beautiful photos of Krishna and the decorations that are made on Krishna. Or the Krishna book and the beautiful paintings of Krishna. You want to hear nice things? Hear Krishna Katha, hear Bhagavad Gita, hear Bhagavatam, hear stories of Krishna. You want to eat something nice? Make nice bhoga for Krishna. Call everybody and eat. Right? So these are all the ways by which we can control. You can Krishna-ize everything. So it's not that you are not going to eat and you're not going to sleep and you're not going to hear and you're not going to do. All this you will do. But just modify how you do it in such a way that you are Krishna-izing everything. This is the process of devotional service as is stated in Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada says. And unintelligent commentators try to divert the mind of the reader to other subjects, but there is no other subject in Bhagavad Gita than devotional service. That is very, very important. Then, Indriyartheshu Vairagyam, renunciation of objects of sense gratification. Then is Anahankara Evacha, false ego. Can somebody read this paragraph?
Prabhu, if nobody is there, can I
Please
continue?
go ahead.
Okay, Prabhu. False ego means accepting this body as oneself. When one understands that he is not his body and his spirit soul, he comes to his real ego. Ego is there. False ego is condemned, but not real ego. In the Vedic literature, Brihad Aranyaka Upanishad 1.4.10, it is said, Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman, I am spirit. This I am, the sense of self, also exists in the liberated stage of self-realization. This sense of I am is ego, but when the sense of I am is applied to this false body, it is false ego. When the sense of self is applied to reality, that is real ego. There are some philosophers who say we should give up our ego, but we cannot give up our ego because ego means identity. We ought, of course, to give up the false identity with the body. Shall I continue, Prabhu? You'll explain.
Okay, go ahead. So there is a very good description already made of the false ego. So that's very nice. We all have ego. So he very clearly talks about when one understands that he is not his body and his spirit soul, he comes to real ego. Otherwise, it is false ego. So that's very, very, very clear aspect that Srila Prabhupada brings about at this particular stage. Right. So please go on to the next paragraph, Mataji.
Okay, Prabhu. One should try to understand the distress of accepting birth, death, old age, and disease. There are descriptions in various Vedic literatures of birth. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, the world of the unborn, the child's stay in the womb of the mother, its suffering, etc., are all very graphically described. It should be thoroughly understood that birth is distressful because we forget how much distress we have suffered within the womb of the mother. We do not make any solution to the repetition of birth and death. Similarly, at the time of death, there are all kinds of sufferings, and they are also mentioned in the authoritative scriptures. These should be discussed. And as far as disease and old age are concerned, everyone gets practical experiences. No one wants to be diseased and no one wants to become old, but there is no avoiding this. Unless we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distress of birth, death, old age, and disease, there is no impetus for our making advancement in spiritual life. Hare Krishna.
So, Hare Krishna, this is very, very important. One second, Mataji. Yeah. So, this is very, very important. He says, Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, Dukkha, Dosha, Anudarshanam. So, this is sometimes a pessimistic view. You say, Arey Baba, if you are a devotee, why should you look at the negatives only look at the positives. No, but Krishna says, Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadi, Dukkha, Dosha, Anudarshanam. So he says, really a devotee should know that this material body is difficult. This material body is full of miseries. That is the understanding. So the distress of accepting. So when you know that this birth, growth is distressful, you want to get out of that distress. How will you get out of that distress? You will get out by becoming a devotee in such a way that in the future you will never have the opportunity to take birth again. That is called, otherwise it is punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jatare shayanam, iha sansare bahudustare, kripaya pare, pahi murare, Shankaracharya writes. Normally we are all doing activities and we are having constantly a problem of birth, growth, old age, disease, death, and we are stuck in the same cycle of all of that, which is not right. So we should know how to get connected to spiritual life, how to accept a guru, how to understand Krishna, and in that process we will be able to really, get out of this cycle of birth and death. So we should understand that birth is distressful, and similarly every aspect, and at the time of death there is so much of problem. We can sometimes may say somebody died a very simple death, but actually nobody knows how much of difficulty has happened in. So generally when somebody dies, they say people pass stool and urine, right? So death is as difficult as birth. In birth we know how the child's head is squeezed out of the body of the mother. So in that way it is very, very painful. The child comes out crying. And definitely none of us want diseases. Old age, sitting and getting up is a problem. Standing is a problem. Walking is a problem. Eating is a problem. Sleeping is a problem. Everything is a problem. So why do we want this again and again? We need to know how to get out of it. And how to get out of it? Death is not the solution. Krishna consciousness is the solution. So until we have a pessimistic view of this material life, considering the distresses of birth, old age and disease, there is no impetus for us to make advancement in spiritual life. That is why it says, Dukkha Dosha Anudarshanam. It may look pessimistic, but we have to understand that this material world is Dukkhalayam and Ashashvatam. So let's get on. We have still a good part of the presentation to go. So let's move on. Let's finish this presentation and then we will have the Aarti. Give me 10 minutes. Okay. Then we will have Aarti. Others can see also. Right. So please, can somebody read this part of the purport?
Should I take it, Prabhuji?
Yes, go ahead, Umeshji.
As for detachment from children, wife and home, it is not meant that one should have no feeling for these. They are natural objects of affection, but when they are not favorable to spiritual progress, then one should not be attached to them. The best process for making the home pleasant is Krishna consciousness. If one is in full Krishna consciousness, he can make his home very happy, because this process of Krishna consciousness is very easy. One need only chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Accept the remnants of foodstuffs offered to Krishna. Have some discussions on books like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and engage oneself in deity worship. These four things will make one happy. One should train the members of his family in this way. The family members can sit down morning and evening and chant together Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. If one can mold his family life in this way to develop Krishna consciousness, following these four principles, then there is no need to change from family life to renounced life. But if it is not congenial, not favorable for spiritual advancement, then family life should be abandoned. One must sacrifice everything to realize or serve Krishna, just as Arjuna did. Arjuna did not want to kill his family members, but when he understood that these family members were impediments to his Krishna realization, he accepted the instruction of Krishna and fought and killed them. In all cases, one should be detached from the happiness and distress of family life because in this world, one can never be fully happy or fully miserable. Should I
Wonderful.
continue?
Yes, you can continue.
Happiness and distress are concomitant factors of material life. One should learn to tolerate, as advised in Bhagavad Gita. One can never restrict the coming and going of happiness and distress. So one should be detached from the materialistic way of life and be automatically equipoised in both cases. Generally, when we get something desirable, we are very happy, and when we get something undesirable, we are distressed. But if we are actually in the spiritual position, these things will not agitate us. To reach that state, we have to practice unbreakable devotional service. Devotional service to Krishna without deviation means engaging oneself in the 9 processes of devotional service: chanting, hearing, worshipping, offering, respect, etc., as described in the last verse of the 9th chapter. That process should be followed.
Please continue.
Naturally, when one is adapted to the spiritual way of life, he will not want to mix the materialistic man. That should go against his grain. One may test himself by seeing how far he is inclined to live in a solitary place without unwanted association. Naturally, a devotee has no taste for unnecessary sporting or cinema going or enjoying some social function because he understands that these are simply a waste of time. There are many research scholars and philosophers who study sex life or some other subject, but according to Bhagavad Gita, such research work and philosophical speculation have no value. That is more or less nonsensical. According to Bhagavad Gita, one should make research by philosophical discretion into the nature of the soul. One should make research to understand the self. This is recommended here.
Let me read from
As
here. As far as
okay.
self realization is concerned, it is clearly stated here that Bhakti Yoga is especially practical. As soon as there is question of devotion, one must consider the relationship between the super soul and the individual soul. The individual soul and the super soul cannot be one, at least not in Bhakti conception, the devotional conception of life. Very clear. The individual soul, Jivatma and Paramatma, cannot be one. This service of the individual soul to the super soul is eternal, nityam. As it is stated, so bhakti or devotional service is eternal. One should be established in that philosophical conviction that the Jivatma should always be serving the Paramatma. And Srimad Bhagavatam 1 to 11, this is explained. Vadanti tat tattva vidhastatvam yajnanam advayam. Those who are actually knowers of the absolute truth know that the self is realized in 3 different phases as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Bhagavan is the last word in the realization of the absolute truth. Therefore, one should reach up to that platform of understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus engage in devotional service of the Lord. That is the perfection of knowledge. I think this is the last paragraph. Somebody else wants to read it?
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Beginning from practicing humility up to the point of realization of the supreme truth, the absolute personality of Godhead, this process is just like a staircase beginning from the ground floor and going up to the top floor. Now on this staircase, there are so many people who have reached the first floor, the second or the third floor, etc. But unless one reaches the top floor, which is the understanding of Krishna, he is at the lower stage of knowledge. If anyone wants to compete with God and at the same time make advancement in spiritual knowledge, he will be frustrated. It is clearly stated that without humility, understanding is not truly possible. To think oneself God is most puffed up. Although the living entity is always being kicked by the stringent laws of material nature, he still thinks I am God because of ignorance. The beginning of knowledge, therefore, is amanitva, humility. One should be humble and know that he is subordinate to Supreme Lord. Due to rebellion against the Supreme Lord, one becomes subordinate to material nature. One must know and be convinced of this truth. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. With humility, we have to understand who God is. Once we rebel, then we become subordinate to Maya. When we rebel, we are born in this material world and we become subordinate to material nature. Very beautifully said. Very quickly, I'm going to go through what is said here. The process of acquiring knowledge is said here. The less intelligent people, they do not understand this process. They think of it as also interaction of the field of activity. But these 20 that are mentioned here are beyond the 24 elements as a field of activity. And here, what is the real process of acquiring knowledge? What should be sadhaka's consciousness? He should be subordinate, humble, and he does not want to compete with Krishna. What are the essential important qualities? He should accept the spiritual master. He should then, have unalloyed devotional service. And then, how to test one's progress? Judge the qualities like humility and pridelessness. If somebody is humble and prideless, he is not hankering for pride, then you know that he is progressing in the way of knowledge. And what is ignorance? Anything speculated beyond these items is called ignorance, nonsense. And how to do the process of Krishna consciousness? How does it help? It helps. The simple way is chant Hare Krishna, honor Prasadam, discuss Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, and do deity worship. Today I am also going to quickly show you an arti that's going to happen here. But before we get there, just as a process here, we covered humility, pridelessness, non-violence, tolerance, simplicity, accepting spiritual master, cleanliness, steadiness, self-control, renunciation of sense objects, absence of false ego, the perception of the evils of birth, death, disease, and old age, detachment. What is detachment? No entanglement with family. Then we talked about even-mindedness, unalloyed devotional service, which is most important, aspiring to live in a solitary place, detachment from general masses, jana from crowd, avoiding from crowd, accepting the importance of spiritual realization, and philosophical search for the absolute truth. So, just before we move on, the 9 process of devotional service, we will come back, start from here, and then we will come up to this summary here. This we will cover in the next verse before we again start from verse 13. Thank you very much. I know today's session was long. And any comments, any questions before we then move to the Aarti? We have the next few minutes for the question answers if you have any.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, it's a small doubt. You were telling, no, like particular type of nose, mouth, everything according to our desire. It may be looking silly, Prabhu, every time when I go out, if I see, I should not tell, the African peoples and all. Their facial features resemble in a different way, no, Prabhu. That time I'll be wondering whether they wanted this body or how it is, Prabhu.
See, for an African person, they don't like the face of an Indian person.
Yeah.
Okay, an American person does not like the face of an Indian person. So we can't be racist from that particular angle. But yes, we do see that some of them look ghastly. Okay,
Yes,
they are
yes.
all different. But if you look at here more, at least, of course, these Shastras talk about 400,000 species of human variety. But let us go beyond human variety and let's look at animal variety. According to what, the dog is able to hear from a distance, is able to smell so many things. So, according to what you're doing today, if you have dogly tendencies, then the Lord gives you a form by which you become a dog. And the pig eats anything that is there. Then if you want to eat anything on the street, the Lord says, become a pig. So that's the aspect that it says there. And very beautifully, Krishna has already explained it as to how you get the different type of ears, eyes, etc. Thank you.
Yes. Today class was beautiful, Prabhu. You were like you have given in detail, like even the facial features also, how we are desiring and all. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for clarifying everything. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare
Beauty is
Krishna.
in the eye of the beholder. We may think somebody is not beautiful, but within the African community, the most ugly person that we think may be the most beautiful according to them. So we should look at the beauty of what Krishna has given in that
Yes,
way.
yes.
But at least this topic is more, let us focus more on the other living beings. Any quick comments? Anything else?
Hare Krishna.
Superb. The class was very good because personally, the cleanliness of internal and external, that was very nice. Like externally, first we have to keep ourselves very clean, take bath, do achamanam after every unwanted touch in the body. And externally, chanting of the Maha Mantra both put together definitely will take us to a little way to Krishna. At least that was wonderful point, Prabhu. I really liked it. Of course, everything else was nice, but this external and internal cleanliness is very, very important, I feel.
I just need to say one other thing. What Shastra says, as soon as you get up, as quickly as possible after finishing your basic duties, you have to have a bath. Why? If you have a bath immediately, you think, okay, let me do some puja, let me wear tilak. And as soon as you wear your tilak and everything external, then your consciousness internal develops. If you think today I'll have bath late, I'll have at 9 o'clock, that day what happens is you don't have bath until 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock.
Exactly.
You haven't cooked
Exactly.
properly, you haven't eaten anything, you have not done any spiritual activity, or you then tend to feel, let me go to kitchen, cook, oh today puja nahi hua, parwa nahi. The point is you get up, do your activity, clean outside, it sometimes also helps your internal cleaning. That's
Exactly,
also
Prabhu.
part of the
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, Raviji?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Today was a wonderful session, Prabhu. A lot of things were, it's an awakening process sort of a thing, especially compared to non-violent. We all think that non-violence, killing others or killing any animal is non-violence, but when you're not putting others in distress is something which is really something which I learned today. And of course,
And the real aspect of non-violence, ahimsa, is to give Krishna conscious to others. If you don't give Krishna conscious to others, then we are violent. So it is our responsibility. Now that we have known it, we go home to our hometown, to our friends, relatives, brothers, sisters. We should give Bhagavad Gita and knowledge. Then only it is non-violence.
non-violence. That's one of the important thing which I learned. And of course, the other aspect is the tolerance and self-control and determination, which we have been talking about. In today's world, often we have been tested for the tolerance levels, right? We are put into different stress levels and all those things. I need just a simple guidance how to bring that consciousness of tolerance and self-control and determination.
See, we can't change the tolerance of the world, but we have to be tolerant ourselves. And we have to see, fine, what to do. Those people don't know anything. So they are doing something wrong, but I will not react to what they do. I will tolerate. So you start with that. When they gradually start seeing how you are tolerating, they will think, I have bloody troubling this guy 20 times, but he's still not shouting back at me. He'll come and fall at your feet someday or the other.
Yeah.
We can only change ourselves, we can't change others. In this
Change
life.
others. Okay.
But when
Thanks.
they see how tolerant we are, but that tolerant doesn't mean you don't do anything at all. So Krishna
Right.
also asked Arjuna to fight. He didn't
Right.
just tolerate and sit. There's a level to which you tolerate, you take advice also from Bhagavad Gita on it. So Bhagavad Gita doesn't say just tolerate, no. Bhagavad Gita is not a book of ahimsa from that angle that no fighting whatsoever. Fighting for Krishna is ahimsa also.
Okay. Thanks, Prabhu.
Thank you very
And
much.
even about the ego, Prabhu, even about the ego, what you told, like normal tendency is, oh, they didn't tell my name. I did so many things. They never announced my name. That kind of attitude is generally with all of us, especially with working people. But when you explain that, I felt that should come down. We are doing our duty and we do our best in our duty, and leave the rest to Krishna. He will take care. That attitude comes, I think, definitely. That is also
We
one
have
of the
to
major
keep-
things I learned
We
today.
have to keep reading these 20 qualities or the 20 things of knowledge.
Exactly.
again and
Yes,
again.
yes, Prabhu.
And the 26 qualities of devotees. When we read all these things again and again, I'm telling you,
I think we need
understand
to
ourselves.
after
We can read this further.
after the YouTube is updated, we need to listen to this lecture again once
No,
or twice.
read Bhagavad
Lot
Gita
of
book
points.
again and again. In our life, we should read again and again. So please don't hesitate. Please read. And I will also send you the presentations at the end of every chapter. I will do that.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. The next few minutes, if you want to stay, you can. We are just going to have a quick aarti. I'm at the ashram. So you are most welcome to have the darshan of our deities in our flat 607 ashram. Okay? So I'll slightly move out of the scene so you have a full view of the deities here. And I will pin the picture. If you want to stay, you can stay. But just wait for another minute or two. And then at least if you want to stay, you can stay. Even I'll be here for 10 minutes. We can think about what we want to do. Sorry.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Yes. Ghanshyam.
I will ask you a question after that. I'll ask you a question after that.
Okay. So
Is it okay or some other time?
No problem. If it's a quick question, go ahead.
Okay. Prabhuji, today purport was wonderful. I opened the purport. My question is only that if Prabhupada has given any initiation to a devotee, somebody who is eating onion garlic.
See, Prabhupada accepted some of them as disciples, even without initiation in one way, like for instance, George Harrison. So, but generally, we don't know of Prabhupada initiating people in that particular way. But there are exceptions that can be seen in some cases. They know that some people are not able to avoid it for various reasons. Sometimes, we have many people in our labor camps who are initiated. But the problem that they have is that they have to only eat what is cooked in their labor camp because they are not allowed to cook there. So from that angle, sometimes we oversee, but these devotees also try to avoid as much as possible eating onion and garlic. So there can be some allowances, but I don't know of Srila Prabhupada clearly giving up some of these aspects in initiating people. But some he has considered almost as initiated merely because they are doing wonderful service, like George Harrison. He gave them initiation. I won't say he won't have eaten onion and garlic, but even though he was not given an initiated name, he was considered like an initiated disciple of Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghanshyamji. So this is a flat 607, an ashram that we have in Bardubai, and we have Balak Prabhu standing there. We have here Srila Prabhupada Vigraha there, and you also see here Karuna Kar Chaitanya Prabhu, Karunavatar Chaitanya Prabhu, and we have a full 3-bedroom apartment here, which is housed.
I've been here.
Yes, which we host to take care of devotees. We have 2 sets of Radha Krishna deities, and so every day Aarti happens here. Devotees, sometimes visiting devotees, sannyasis stay here. That is the broad plan. But go ahead, let's have a quick Aarti, and then I have to run to another kirtan. So over to you, Karunavatar Prabhu. Please go ahead, do the Aarti, start, open. Shri Krishna Chandra Bhagavan ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Damodara ki jai, Thai Gaur Premanande ki bajaya jaya Prabhachande Arati Kashona Janami Tatavane Yakamanala Badaki Nita Chan Bamegalada Nipate Advaita Shri Vasa Chatranara Nibabashi Atigo Rajan Ratna Simhasa Adi Devatane Ivanarari Adhikari Kamaradulaya Sanjaya Mukunda Bhasu Moshe Adilaya Kima Shankar Bhaje Ganga Bhaje Bhaje Karata Mathura Mridanga Bala Marasala Shiva Shiva Vadana Ujwa Nala Dese Manamala Kore Jalamala Shiva Shiva Sukana Radha Preme Gadada Bhakti Gaurara Sampada Gaurangera Radishora Jagadanamana Loma Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo Namami Padaya Krishna Prestaya Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Ete Nami Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyamari Paskatya Vishankari Jai Thank you, Jayam Vishnupada Paramam Privrajacharya Ashtotra Sata Sri Srimad Hidvangreta Bhajaranaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jayam Vishnupada Paramam Privrajacharya Ashtotra Sata Sri Srimad Nitya Leela Bhaksham Bhakti Siddhanta Swati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki Ananta Bodhi Vrinda ki Namacharya Srila Haridasa Thakur ki Prem Chakho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta ki Shri Shri Radha Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki Vrindavan Matal Dham ki Mayapur Navadip Dham ki Gangamai Jamunamai ki Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani ki Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda ki Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Bharat Madan ki Shri Jagannath Baldev Subhadhamaya ki Kan Guru Vrinda ki Jai Gaur Premanande all glories to the Assimiludis, all glories to the Assimiludis, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Shri Radha Dhamodara ki. All glories to all the devotees attending the Bhagavad Gita class. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
The Aarti here at 6:07 happens every day. If some of you just want to come along, be here for a small while, don't hesitate. Please join. Thank you very much. Let's close this session for today here. The devotees will continue with Narsinga prayers and then close this session for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you very much.
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna.